Good evening. Sitting in for Bill Bonds, who's on vacation, I'm Don Lark. Something a little bit different tonight, but something I'll think you'll like. As most of us know, and some of us will admit, Detroit is a city of immigrants, though not all of them are from other countries. Following World War II, thousands of Southerners migrated north from the Appalachians to the assembly lines here. Today, white Appalachians make up the third largest ethnic group in the city. Tonight, we're going to listen to the story of those early Southern migrants as told in the original Bluegrass opera of Detroit. I'll be talking with the composer of this unique opera and with a man whose hobby is studying Appalachian whites here on what should be a fun and informative edition of Bill Bonds Detroit. Anybody who's ever driven up I-75 from Kentucky, from the hills of Tennessee, will recognize those pictures. The music, that's the Bluegrass Opera of Detroit. We're going to be talking tonight about what a lot of people found at the end of that drive, an assembly line, an automobile assembly line here in Detroit. The Bluegrass Opera, the words, the music, well, that comes from one of our guests tonight, Bud McKirkin, who is with U.S. News and World Report. Bud, nice to have you here.
Don.
Ford Thompson also joining us tonight. Ford, a Southfield school teacher who makes it a hobby to study Appalachian whites. Gentlemen, let me just open up a freewheeling discussion, if I can, and ask you both how the migration got started around the World War II time. Did an auto executive put out the word, let's go south, let's get these boys up here, and let's give them a little bit of money and put them to work on the assembly line, or what?
I think that happened for sure, didn't it?
As a matter of fact, it did. I know of one man in particular, in fact a friend of ours, who worked at Pontiac at General Motors, and his job was to go down and recruit workers and actually bring busloads of them back to the area.
How recruitable were they? How receptive were they to the pitch?
Well, probably from word of mouth from relatives who had already been here. You know, it's a little difficult to, I think, convince these people to go unless they'd heard from a cousin or an uncle or someone who already had been established in the area.
Bud, what do you think when they got here? Did they hate it right away, or did that take some time?
Well, I don't know. I question whether they hate it at all. They say they do, most of them. They say they can't wait to get back home to Kentucky or Tennessee and get back up on the hill and raise potatoes or whatever they raise down there. But I observe a lot of them stick around here and get some grandchildren in the area and really become Detroiters. So
I think it was Henry Ford who said that he put the world on wheels. I'm sure several thousand Appalachian whites would disagree with him, or at least claim part of that credit themselves. Is there a big feeling of pride among these people in what they do on the line?
Well, I think that there is. In fact, I think it's kind of unique that the UAW, for example, was able to organize Appalachian whites because, you know, normally they are very unorganized, not really disorganized, but unorganized. In fact, even in areas of eastern Kentucky today, the United Mine Workers finds it difficult to organize these people into a strong union. I'm not quite sure how the UAW was able to do it, but they did.
You say Appalachia, I say Appalachia. I referred to the men as boys, which is how the Southern men refer to each other. Do they refer to each other among themselves? Do they call each other hillbillies still, or is that pretty much passé?
Well, no. I mean, if you are a hillbilly, in quotation marks, you can call yourself one, or your friends and so on. But other people calling you that, it has a different connotation, you know, because it's a put-down.
Okay, let's hear from the Bluegrass Opera right now. This is a number called You Put the U in the UAW. Now, Bud, you wrote this. What's it all about?
it's about a woman who was instrumental in the organizing efforts in the 30s and 40s, and I think always there was a woman, many of them, right up in the front lines of the picket lines, helping out and really getting the thing rolling. So this is an ode to woman organizer, sort of a homogenized version of all those ladies.
How long ago did you write it?
I think about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Okay. This is the Bluegrass Opera of Detroit. You put the U in the UAW.
You put the U in the UAW. United, we pushed them to the wall. We're the woman who showed the way. We made them companies pay. And you put the U in the UAW. You showed us we could stand as one. Without you, we never got her done. When the Ford men knocked it down, we gathered all around, and Fords had to deal with the UAW. You put the U in the UAW. United, we pushed them to the wall. With a woman who showed the way, we made them companies pay. And you put the U in the UAW. That good old GM town. We took our seats and closed their factory down. You passed food through the window light, gave us strength for the long, long fight. And GM's had to deal with the UAW. You put the U in the UAW. United, we pushed them to the wall. With a woman who showed the way, we made them companies pay. And you put the U in the UAW. Come on, boys. Put the U in the UAW. United, we pushed them to the wall. With a woman who showed the way, we made them companies pay. And you put the U in the UAW. Yeah, you put the U in the UAW.
The original Bluegrass Opera of Detroit. I'll leave you with this question. Can a transplanted Appalachian white find happiness, success, and love in the Motor City? We'll be talking about that when this edition of Bill Bond's Detroit continues in a moment. We're talking about the migration of thousands of people from their homes in the hills of Kentucky and Tennessee to the automobile assembly lines here in Detroit. We're talking about that with Bud McCurgan and with Ford Thompson, who have studied the problem in some depth. Gentlemen, where did they settle? What kind of shock was it for them to transplant themselves here? Was it what you would call a cultural shock, and how did they deal with it?
Well, most Appalachians to Michigan, for example, settled in either Detroit, Flint, or Pontiac. In Detroit, neighborhoods were set up because those who had come first would write back to their cousins and uncles and others, telling them they had found them a place to live or they had found them a job. And so when these people came to Detroit, they would settle in particular neighborhoods. Now these neighborhoods may be around Tiger Stadium, for example, out Michigan Avenue or Jefferson. They might have been further downriver. They might have been in the old Cass Corridor.
Yeah. What kind of choice did they have? Was it a job in the coal mine or on the farm back home as opposed to the assembly line? Perhaps more money in Detroit? Is that what it boiled down to?
Basically, that's it, yeah.
Or a choice between no job and a job here, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of them had that.
How did they like it here? Did they feel stuck? Did they feel trapped, Bud?
Well, the ones, my friends, most of them claim that they are very unhappy here and that Detroit's a terrible place. And I'm talking about the whole Detroit area, and they can't wait to get back home when they retire, get their 30 years in, and go down to live on a hill someplace. But the truth is, I think they become Detroiters and sometimes have some problems I've heard of when they go back home. People back there think they talk funny, for example. Picked up a little Detroit accent. So, I think it's a lot of talk that's not really serious. I mean, I think the ones who really hate Detroit are no longer here.
How did you yourself get into their music as you have, to the point where you could write songs, compose ideas, and get them across with music?
I grew up in Illinois, and most of my neighbors in the little town I lived in were from Kentucky and Tennessee, and next door neighbors were from Virginia and West Virginia. And one of the neighbors in particular, Junior Stewart, was always picking away on his Gibson guitar and this kind of music, and they got it in my toes and feet, and I guess it just stayed with me. I like it very much, and have sort of followed it around and have gotten to know some of the people who practice this bluegrass style of music. And,
Dueling banjos, which came from the movie Deliverance with Burt Reynolds. Would that be styled bluegrass music?
I guess that would be an example most people would know about, yeah.
Okay, well, the number we're going to hear is something we were just touching on. It's called Stuck in Detroit. But before we hear it, let's meet the original Bluegrass Opera of Detroit, starting with Dave on the left. David.
I'm David Kahn.
Hi, I'm Fiddlin' Steve Whalen.
My name's Lee Kaufman.
Howdy, Herschel Freeman.
Tim Wilson.
Now let's hear Stuck in Detroit from the original Bluegrass Opera of Detroit, words and music by Bud McCurgan.
Stuck in Detroit, I gotta get away from here.
I want to go down south where my people wait for me. Now when will Detroit let me get away? Tomorrow, next week, in a month or two, I'll go. See how hard it is to go. I-75 seems to only run one way. And once in Detroit, it's hard to get away, because the money's good, car payments always do. Detroit grabs you, buys your heart and time. Big dollars come and go just like the rain. And how'd I get stuck in this big old town? A gal back home just cannot understand. I want to go down south where my people wait for me. Yeah, tomorrow, next week, in a month or two, I'll go. Yeah, tomorrow, next week, in a month or two, I'll go. Yeah, tomorrow, next week, in a month or two, I'll go.
The money's good, the car payments always do. That's Stuck in Detroit by the original Bluegrass Opera of Detroit. We'll be back with more on Bill Bond in just a minute. In 1970, the United States Census reported there were more than 298,000 Southern whites, or Appalachian whites, living within the 7-county region around Detroit, and that figure doesn't include children. While I wouldn't exactly call Appalachian whites an ethnic group, that's a large group of people, and yet they seem to have disappeared, to have melted completely within Detroit. We don't hear about anything about them as a group at all. Why is that, Bud?
Well, they have some problems. I have friends who, for example, tell me they approached Mayor Young's people about getting a spot on the ethnic festival list down on the riverfront, and were told, they claim, they are not ethnics, so they can't participate. So maybe they aren't ethnics. And but as a group, they don't get too organized. All these, what, 298,000 or whatever that figure was. There's one organized group I know of, and they call themselves the Kentuckians of Michigan. They meet at least once a year in a big picnic, and I guess the main purpose of their meeting is to play bluegrass music and eat a lot of food and drink soda pop.
No. Ford, you mentioned that there was quite a gathering spot for them here until recently when the place closed. But what was that place like? What was the name of that?
Okay, we're talking about Eileen's Restaurant, which was out be West Jefferson. Eileen, apparently we found out that she has gone back home recently, back to Alabama. But Eileen's was kind of a unique place in that you could go and listen to bluegrass, down-home kind of music. I know that some bands would drive up from Toledo and Dayton and other places just for one evening. And as you walked into Eileen's, one of the things I think that impressed me at first was the fruit jars, the mason jars, full of soil and labeled Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, West Virginia, and these people had a little bit of home there.
Are they as aware of their roots and as conscious of developing their roots as black people have now become, or are they trying to put all that behind them?
Well, we had talked a little bit about this earlier. I was in Cincinnati recently for the Appalachian Festival that Cincinnati holds yearly, which is a week-long thing, as well as Louisville, Kentucky has one. And one of the speakers there mentioned a book, which I have here, called The Doll Maker. Now, the setting of this book is Detroit, wartime Detroit. And it seems to me that if anybody really wants to, you know, find out what it was like to live in wartime Detroit as an Appalachian migrant, that this would be the book. In fact, one of the speakers in Cincinnati mentioned that for Appalachians, urban Appalachians, this would be the equivalent to their roots. In fact, Cincinnati has what's called the Urban Appalachian Council, which is a very active organization. Simply, I think, because it's a more recent number of migrants who've come to Cincinnati than Detroit. They bypassed it, you see, before they came here.
How are the Appalachians viewed as a group? How does society see them?
Well, I don't think the Beverly Hillbillies help much in casting this image. There's
what about
a stereotype. Hee-haw. I'd really like hee-haw myself, but some people think the old guy lying down by the dog with the bottle in his hand casts an unfortunate stereotype. But I don't worry too much about those things. And I don't think these Appalachians or Appalachians, however you want to say it, worry about it too much either. I think that they're becoming proud of their heritage in the really beautiful spots down there, and especially the second and third generations that have come up here.
No doubt they would like to do more with their ethnicity. As you mentioned, they did try to get into the ethnic summer festivals here in Detroit, but they were not able to make it. Has the city of Detroit changed them at all as a group, do you feel?
I think it's altered their accents somewhat, for sure, and their outlook. I don't think anyone can come to a big city without being changed.
Now, the second and third generation, have they stayed in the auto plants, or are they branching out?
A lot of them do work in the plants that I know of, and some of them go back home. I know a fellow and his wife who are the son and daughter of two different people from down there, have gone back and opened a music store in the mountains in Tennessee. So,
okay, we've got another number coming up here that you've written, Bud, and you've done the music for. It's called Body by Fisher, Frame by Jerry McGee. Briefly, what's that about? That's back in the auto plant.
Well, I wrote this song after I'd made a tour of the Cadillac assembly plant and saw a guy down in the pits putting something on those cars, and he seemed to be enjoying himself a great deal. And we call him Jerry McGee because it rhymes with some other words in the song, essentially.
Okay, here they are, the original bluegrass opera of Detroit.
2 bolts and a frame. I stick them in the holes there and give them just a little twist before I turn around and grab the headlights and stick them in the trunk. My buddy Clark, he runs the bolts up tight with his air wrench, then he hits 4 more that some other guy started back a ways. 9 hours a day, 6 days a week, 23 minutes for coffee in the morning and 23 more after lunch. But I do something else too. I make a little mark on every damn Cadillac that passes over my head. Well, I figure I got something like 286,000 of my cars out on the road today, or in junkyards. You know, Clark can't understand it, what I do. He shakes his head. He used to get down on me for making them marks, but now I'm thinking he's a-wishing he'd been making some of them marks himself.
Put it in, pick it up and put it in, pick it up and put it in, pick it up and put it in, pick it up.
Here all night, must be a sight. Puppy dance around, can't see the street.
Pick it up, put it in, pick it up and put it in, pick it up.
Rock the place. My hand shoot past my face. Both in each hand, finding the holes in the
Pick it up and put it in, here comes another one. Pick it up and put it in, here comes another one. Pick it up.
Guess the Clark, I make my little mark.
Body by Fisher and frame by Jerry McGee. Pick it up and put it in, pick it up and put it in, pick it up and put it in, pick it up.
Well, there's strangers sailing through the air. There goes another pair. Radiator slipping by, it never seems to end.
Pick it up and put it in, pick it up and put it in.
And without these bolts I start, these old cars would fall apart. I'm the old boy, keeps the rattles out of Cadillacs.
Pick it up and put it in, here comes another one. Pick it up and put it in, here comes another one.
And before it's not very long, you're gonna hear my little song. Body by Fisher and framed by Jerry McGee. Body by Fisher and framed by Jerry McGee.
Well, that might be a body by Fisher, but buddy, that framed by Jerry McGee. We'll be back with more right after this. I'd like to thank our guests, Bud McCurgan and Ford Thompson, for putting tonight's topic to music, Southern Whites and Detroit's automobile assembly plants. I can thank the original Bluegrass Opera by mentioning they'll be at the Raven Gallery tonight and tomorrow night at the Attic Theater in Greektown for the first 3 weekends in September. For Bill Bonds, who continues on vacation, I'm Don Lark, and now here's the Bluegrass Opera back with Going Home to Detroit.
I'm going home to Detroit. No, I've never even been there. I've never seen the city, never smelled a factory, never cashed a paycheck in my life. I'm going home to Detroit, to them cement streets and buildings. They say she's not too pretty, kind of rough and windblown, but a place where I can make it on my own. And I've known since before my daddy died in that mine that my place in life was north of here, working on that line. I'm going home to Detroit. Dreams tomorrow, I'll be driving home on a weekend in a Lincoln Continental of my own. I'm going home to Detroit, though I've never even been there. I've never seen the city, never smelled a factory, never cashed a paycheck in my life. And I've known since before my daddy died in that mine that my place in life was north of here, working on that line. I'm going home to Detroit.